the recording. Now would be a good time to turn that video off, but more than welcome to leave it on. We'd love to see your faces if you're happy for that to be in the recording. My name's Taylor Field, and I'm the VegNet Regional Development Officer for Tasmania. And I'd also like to introduce Prue Rothwell, who's the VegNet Regional Support Officer in Tassie as well. For those of you that don't know, VegNet is the Vegetable and Onion Industry Extension Program that's been funded by Hort Innovation using the Vegetable Research and Development Levy and government funding as well. Due to the short nature of the session today as well, you'll notice that most of your microphones are turned off at this stage. If it is possible, we would really appreciate if you could keep yourselves on mute during this webinar, just so we can get through everything. We don't have time today for a Q&A session, but we would definitely love if you do have any questions to pop them in the chat. And what we'll be doing is following up after the webinar with some answers to those questions. So please feel free to pop any questions or information that you'd like to share in the chat as well, which would be great. Prue's also about to put a link to a Slido survey in the chat, which we would really appreciate if you're able to open that before we kick off. There's the first three questions that would be great if you could answer those before we sort of head through into some of the chats and presentations. That would be great if you could have a look at those now and just leave it open in your browser separately, and there'll be a few more towards the end if that's possible. But before we commence, I would like to acknowledge and pay respects to the Palawa people, the Tasmanian Aboriginal people, as the traditional custodians of this land, and acknowledge elders past and present. I'm currently dialing in from the south of the state, and there's lots of beautiful creeks and wildlife in the area where I live, which I love to be able to enjoy. And one of my favourite things to do is often to go up to the back of our place and sit under some of the big gums and actually take some time and listen to some of the native birds that are around. So if you do get a few minutes today to take a little bit of time out and appreciate some of those landscapes near you that have been here and looked after for a very long time, it's definitely worth taking the time to do that. But we'll jump straight in. And the purpose of today's session really is to increase awareness of fall armyworm within Tasmania and to talk through some tips on what to be looking for, and also the impact that it's had in other growing regions across the country, particularly sort of in that vegetable production regions as well. In Tassie, fall armyworm is a declared pest under the current biosecurity regulations that are in place, which means that any sightings are notifiable to Biosecurity Tasmania. It has made its way here before in 2021, so we know it's able to travel, and it's important to be monitoring and be prepared and just make sure people in your business are aware of it and across things to be looking for. It's not so much a matter of will it come, it's when will it be here type of conversation as well. And on that note, I would love to introduce John Nancaro from BJ's Cowfresh in Bowen, who's been unfortunately dealing with fall armyworm since its arrival in the country, and Ramesh Puri as well from Queensland DPI, who's working on the National Fall Armyworm Innovation System project for the Australian vegetable industry. So we're going to jump straight in with a Q&A session with John, with a few questions to hopefully give some insight into what he's seeing up in Bowen and how they're managing it as well. John, welcome and thanks for joining us. It would be great to hear from you how long you've been managing fall armyworm, how you're seeing it behave in the crop compared to different pests that you have, and how's it impacting your production?
Oh, morning, Taylor. Morning, growers in Tassie and everyone down there. Hope you're having a good time down there. Nice weather. So fall armyworm started in 2020. I've been working in corn, sweet corn, maize, millet, sorghum, all those varieties that unfortunately fall armyworm love to consume and attack. Been working with it since 2020. Seeing, can you guys still hear me? That was weird. That was odd. Depending on working with fall armyworm is a very challenging topic because it is it's a grub that's come over from the US, and it has pretty much naturalized itself in Australia because it loves our climate. It's pretty much it'll just annihilate a crop within a night, 2 nights, 3 nights if you let it get away. Things that we see in our sweet corn at the moment is we need to assess and observe the grub and how is feeding and how it's actually moving around in the crop itself. So in our sweet corn, we normally do our investigations starting. Oh, my brain is lost today now. Sorry about this, guys. Um, just let me get myself together again. Sorry. Um, with sweet corn, it will attack at a young stage and it will attack very voraciously. So we are assessing our crops from point of planting all the way through to cobbing and harvesting. The impacts it has on us, it actually affects our yield in great significant amounts and will completely, like I was saying before, completely annihilate the crop within a night, 2 nights, 3 nights if we're not keeping it on assessment and watching it carefully. The damages we normally see affect sweet corn will also affect maize and sorghum the same way. It'll attack the leaf. It will absorb the solar cells of the plant itself and just lose your yield in total. We have seen it also affect our capsicum crops up here as well. And pretty much you just got to keep an eye on it.
So in terms of that monitoring frequency, then you're sort of saying it can really have quite a big impact in a few days. How often are you out in the crop scouting for it, looking for eggs? What sort of detection mechanisms are you using up north at the minute, and how are you sampling to find it in the crop?
So monitoring frequency, we're scouting twice a week at the moment. And that is an absolute minimum when you what assessing and observing for armyworm. Um, we'd like to assess more, but it's not practical to assess it further during the week. Reason for the assessments of twice a week is the way it grows so quickly for us. So Mesh will take care of this topic a little bit later and how fast it grows for us. Uh, um, but it will pretty much you can walk into a crop on a Monday morning, assess, you'll find eggs laying around the place. Come in on a Thursday when you're doing your second check, and it's ready at its second stage, third stage, already consuming the leaf and breaking the plant down fully. Monitoring techniques we use is a destructive sampling. So pretty much I'll walk into a paddock and pull out the active growing terminal and open up and unroll the leaves and unroll the scroll to see how many grubs are inside. Because the way they are, the way um, the way they populate and fester or take over a plant is they'll lay a large egg graft, and the little ones, little the first instars will just completely spread out from that first egg graft and just consume the entire leaf at any stage.
And I guess management is a big question for a lot of growers, particularly down here. How are you managing that? Are you using different techniques? Is it an IPM approach? What are you doing to sort of manage it if it's I guess so widespread where you are?
So management techniques we are using an IPM program that I've worked in with our guys up here and working with a natural environment, working with our conventional programs of insecticides, biological program of biological pests and biopesticides, and also utilizing the rapid aim system as well too. So primary source would be using the rapid aim system to assess, see our population movement of the moths and the adults. So on our farm here, about 600 hectares, or 300 hectares, sorry, in Bowen, we have traps set out throughout the farm itself, and I can assess those traps weekly or daily and see where these movements are. And I can then, once they get into the paddock or where the crop is grown, I can assess and go, sweet, okay, I see that I have a high population of moth. I can link that to our egg lays and things like that. Utilizing our IPM program from there, using parasitic wasps to control our egg grafts. And there is also a local parasitic fly which is located up here in North Queensland that actually will attack the full armyworm grub. So we're trying to sort of see if we can potentially build up a native and natural population up here, utilizing our natural insects that we have.
Hmm.
Under the terms of biological bioinsecticides. There are two main organisations that are currently within production of these chemicals. So you've got OCP, Organic Crop Protection, and you've also got Ag Biotech. They're the two main ones that people can utilise around Australia, but always check the labels in what you can and can't do in your area. On the terms of conventional methods, we are definitely always using the APVMA to make sure we are allowed and legally spraying certain chemicals. On our farms, we are utilizing Group 28s, Group 5s, Group 6s, 18s, 3As, and A1s, all under permits, all under regulation as well. And the last one as well, pheromones in utilization within the rapid aim system. They're using a pheromone system. Um, but still, there are other techniques of utilizing pheromone actually can bringing in the moth into the crop and actually annihilating the moth with the pheromone as it ingests the insecticide within the pheromone to knock out the adult population.
And in terms of how you're applying sprays to, I guess, get within the canopy of particularly something like sweet corn for you or maize that we might have down here, what different techniques are you doing to apply those chemicals?
So for our farms here, we have many different irrigating and management methods. So our main ones are using high set rigs, laterals and pivots, planes, choppers, and drones. So our newest technology is utilizing the drone to actually infiltrate and fly over the canopy of the corn crop and ensuring that we have a nice, strong downward pressure of the insecticide or biological going into the crop itself. It always depends on the chemical that you're using, on how you want to utilize it. A lot of the chemicals that are registered are not registered for planes, drones, so we utilize the spray rig or the pivot. Whereas products that are legal and registered for planes, we can utilize within the drone system as well.
No, brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. Ramesh, we might throw over to you if you're happy to share your slides. Ramesh is going to take us through a little bit more in terms of the identification and then some of the life cycle stages of fall armyworm as well.
Thanks, Taylor. Can you please confirm me whether my slides are visible to you all?
They are and looking good.
Good one. Thanks, Taylor. Just a minute, I'll just put this one. Okay. Thanks, Taylor, for my brief introduction. Yeah, I'm an extension officer working for the Department of Primary Industries based up in Bowen, Queensland, and I'm working very closely with John and other industries in the region. So this project is a national fall armyworm extension project, which has been funded by Hot Innovation using the Vegetable Research and Development Levy and funds from the Australian government, with co-funding from the Queensland Department of Primary Industries and the Victorian Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action. So today in my presentation, I will be focusing on what is fall armyworm and why it is a problem with its life cycle, its identifying features, what crops are being impacted from our records that we have been identifying in the region, and the monitoring techniques, the developmental time, like the life cycle, how long will it take in different regions, and the destructive sampling of crops. So fall armyworm is native to tropical and subtropical Americas. It is an invasive pest, highly mobile, and can fly hundreds of kilometers each night on its own, but moves enormous distances with wind assistance. Besides these, they can be transported through the infested crop products, or packaging materials like pellets. Moths fly at dusk to find mates by detecting pheromones. This video is of males being caught in our trapping network. They will fly off if disturbed in the daytime, but you will find many rests in the wall of corn or their host plants. So they tend to try to go deeper in if you reach to get them, but they will fly off and go to the ground or into another plant within a few tens of meters. This is how you might detect the arrival of fall armyworm into Tasmania each summer or spring. So there are broad range of hosts for the fall armyworm, but the major host that we have been recording here in the region is sweet corn, appears to be the most preferred host, followed by maize and sorghum, which I'll be going more details in my coming slides. So here is the life cycle of fall armyworm. So the eggs are laid in masses, neatly set out in rows and layers, and often, but not always, covered in hairs which is white to gray hairs, but sometimes the hairs might be brown. Eggs are scattered and mostly laid on the underside of leaves, but you will find them on the top as well. There will be small egg masses on small plants, just say 10 to 50 eggs each on the seedlings, but often many more, say 200 to 400 eggs on plants after about V3 stage. The whole life cycle takes about 30 to 40 days or more in cooler temperatures, but it can be as little as 25 days in the heat of tropics like in northern Queensland. Fall armyworm larvae feeds on leaves, causing window pane effect. Note well the type of damage. If you get fall armyworm in your crops, you will soon recognize fall armyworm by this type of damage, that is window pane effect. So the larvae pupate in the soil, just like Helicoverpa and other Spodoptera, but they do not diapause. So when looking into the identifying features of fall armyworm eggs, larvae, and adult moths, initially the eggs looks white in color. In 2 to 3 days, depending on the temperature, it turns into brown in color and then to black, and then it hatches to neonates. And the destructive stage of fall armyworm is larvae, which is characterized by inverted Y mark on the head between eyes. More prominent thin lines, white lines develop down the length of the body. Number 3, you can see light colored bands on the sides with a dark colored band between them. On the number 4, you can see 4 smaller dots in a trapeze arrangement on the dorsal surface of all other segments, including the segment at the end of the caterpillar. So this is also one of the important identifying features of fall armyworm. And the other most important identifying feature is 4 large black dots in a square form, which is in the 5 number on second to last upper body segment. And the body color can vary from pinkish to dark brown for the fall armyworm. So the color of the fall armyworm larvae varies from pinkish to dark brown. And the adult moths, when you see on the right side top, the male moths, the moths have a wingspan of 32 to 40 millimeter. The forewing of the male moth is generally gray and brown, with triangular white spots at the tip and near the center of the wing. Female forewings are less distinctly marked, ranging from a uniform grayish-brown to a fine mottling of gray and brown. And adults are nocturnal in habit and are most active during warm, humid evening times. So there are broad range of fall armyworm hosts. Over the past 4 years, Department of Primary Industries, Queensland researchers and extension officers have attempted to collect an evidence-based record of fall armyworm impacts on broadacre and horticulture crops from Australia. So the basis for this list of impacted crops are satisfactory evidence include like photographs, specimens, informations on the severity and scale of the impact, and repeated impacts over the seasons. From our observations, the crops most impacted are sweet corn, maize, and sorghum, followed by other crops as mentioned in the list on the left side box. There are also reports on fall armyworm impacting crops that are characterized as uncertain status, with minor impact on yield and fall armyworm not persisting in the crops, such as celery, lettuce, and one of the, I just want to mention you about the Brassica rapa, subspecies pekinensis, that is wombuck. There was a report that this crop was being impacted by fall armyworm, but it was not persisting. And when we looked into the history of this field, there was a sweet corn crop in that field before this crop went into the ground. So we might expect that that might be some of the larvae and the fall armyworm that is in that sweet corn crops being carried over to the womback, but it is not persisting. So what is the likely risk in Tasmania? So when we see in the northern Queensland, the fall armyworm activity occurs throughout the year. Reductions in populations for a couple of months in winter, when you see during the winter time. However, there have been low peaks during the winter, but during January and February, there are peaks in, when you see in January 2023, there is a peak. In January 24, there is a peak, which is possibly associated with good rains for wild host and dryland host during that time, and the cyclones that we experienced in um, early 2024. So note how unpredictable the peaks are. But this year, we have not found similar peaks in our region. And when I went and looked into the climate modeling, it suggests that many areas in southern Australia are warm enough to sustain populations. Once conditions become warm enough, there is a risk of fall armyworm infestation in other regions. Additionally, host availability and wind flow will be key considerations. So the host means both crop and non-crop. So I tried to run a Darabog model of looking into the developmental time in northern Tasmania. So this Darabog program provides a convenient and rapidly available means of predicting development times using different insect models. It uses gridded climatic data of daily temperatures to generate the developmental time of the fall armyworm and other pests through this model. So fall armyworm are likely to be spring-summer immigrants in Tasmania with suitable temperature and hosts favoring its survival. So when we see on the northern Tasmania, on the yellow shaded area, I see egg to moth. The developmental time from egg to moth is in spring, late spring, and early summer. It is 99 to 87 days. It is still long way in comparison to Bowen, Queensland, where we find 26 to 25 days of that life cycle in our region. So the most probability of having these types of pest activity in northern Tasmania is during spring to summer, November, December. So we might likely avoid the planting of some susceptible host in that region during that time, just to get rid of that window from susceptibility of fall armyworm into those crops and growing into that region. So the other important part, as Zone has already mentioned about the monitoring and early detection, what I want to focus is early detection is essential, particularly during crop emergence and establishment time, because the early crop is very susceptible to fall armyworm. Monitoring needs to begin as soon as the shoots emerge and continue at least every week until harvest, or 2 times in a week, as Zone mentioned earlier. He has been doing like 2 times in a week, and it depends on the human resource that we have. When monitoring the crops, look at eggs and larvae, the window pan effect of its damage, and the frass, as you can see in the images in the bottom middle part of the caterpillar inside plant whorls. Newly hatched neonates, that is a larvae, distribute within hours of hatching to nearby plants up to several meters away by crawling and ballooning. That is, it rides by the wind using a strand of web. Young larvae in high densities often kill considerable numbers of seedlings, and plant damage can be very patchy. So what we suggest is, from our experience in our research and development, random monitoring of the paddock is suggested before making any management decisions. We should not be driven by monitor it in 2 steps, 3 steps, and then make some defined monitoring techniques. We need to have a random monitoring techniques to have that identifying of the infestation and making the management decisions. What we do in our research on monitoring is we walk 15 to 20 steps and look for 5 to 10 plants around. Continue this along the paddock in a random movement, depending on the human resources again. So destructive sampling is essential to adequately assess an infestation. As John has mentioned that he has been practicing this destructive sampling, and this was not a normal practice in Bowen region before, but it has been a regular practice now. So our researcher has done 1,439 damaged plants sampled. This is from Dr. Melina Miles, who is the principal entomologist in DPI. And 412 plants were not having any larvae. So just the damaged plants does not necessarily have larvae into the crop. So we need to have a destructive sampling to make the decisions for our management options, which is very important to go on. So for your information, I have compiled some of the resources that would be of useful for your further references. So the QR code is for our Fall Armyworm Engagement Hub, managed by Queensland Department of Primary Industries. So you can go through this. These slides will be shared later through VegNet system, and Kela is on top of this. And for the identification of fall armyworm, on the bit sheet, there is an armyworm ID fact sheet, which you can go on later. And there is a 3D model of fall armyworm and other pest identifying model, which has been developed by NSW DPAR. This is also one of the very important resources for you to go on after this meeting. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to present in front of you all. And anytime, if you want to have contact with us, please feel free to be in touch for any queries, and we'll be back with you with your queries on the chat. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Ramesh. That's really good information. As Ramesh mentioned, we'll send through the presentation after the webinar as well. If you do still have that survey link open, I would really appreciate if you could take a few minutes just to run through the remaining questions that are on there on that Slido. If you haven't opened it further up in the chat, there is a link there for that. John mentioned earlier around project and rapid aim monitoring devices for fall armyworm as well. So I just wanted to touch on a sub-project within VegNet, which is being run by the Bowen Gumlu Growers Association, along with VegNet, which is the Fall Armyworm Monitoring, National Fall Armyworm Monitoring Project. And as a part of that, we've recently deployed some monitoring devices across 2 properties up in the northwest region of Tassie. So they have a pheromone lure in terms of attracting fall armyworms. So that's something that's just gone out in the last few weeks, and something that Prue and I will be keeping an eye on and working with the growers there as well. But also as an early detection mechanism, I guess gives us a bit more visibility than we've had before as well. Even though it's a bit later in the season, they will still continue through, particularly into those spring and summer times at the back end of this year as well. And just a reminder that with fall armyworm being a declared pest in Tassie, it is a reminder in terms of the best ways to report, and Prue will put some information and some links in there. The exotic, the emergency pest, emergency plant pest hotline is the best port of call if there is any initial concern. But also the team at Biosecurity Tasmania are more than happy to help in terms of support with diagnostic or identification services as well. So there's some details in the chat in how best to get in touch with them. A big thank you to John and Ramesh for joining the session today. We really appreciate your time to share a little bit about what's been happening up in the Bowen region as well, and particularly Ramesh, the resources that are available for growers if they're interested in learning more or being in touch, particularly around the ID and monitoring. And for those that have joined today or will watch this later as well, we'll send around a fall armyworm fact sheet that you can share with different team members across your business, and also keep you up to date through the VegNet newsletters. But really appreciate you jumping on. And I know it's a bit of a quick session, but it's been great to have you on here. Hopefully you've been able to have a bit of a bite over lunch as well during the session. So thank you very much for joining and really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.